are PMs or they're wannabe PMs or they're learning to be a PM? Okay, good. So let me ask this again. So how many people are already PMs? All right, cool. So I'm trying to cater this talk to be a little bit more personal. Then let's go ahead and get started. Well, actually, hold on. Before we get started, I do need a bit of formalities to go through first. It's a disclaimer. And so in this talk, a lot of people you've probably heard of and maybe even respect in the industry will not agree with what I'm going to talk to you about. This is really important to me because I'm going to be talking about the growth industry, what's wrong with the growth industry, what is growth, what is product management, what is marketing, what are the differences, and also kind of how to become a growth PM, what are the skills that we look for, at least at Dropbox, to be one, what's important. And something else is, please form your own opinion from this talk. Please, okay? I like giving this talk because I like being challenged. I like learning more about what people think about what growth is. And it's important for me to kind of see like, oh, okay, like maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm stupid. Which is very possible. And so also I should probably put that Twitter disclaimer of like, these thoughts are my own, not representative of Dropbox, stuff like that. Simply because I'm going to talk about some pretty controversial things, I think. So again, please challenge me. I won't have all the answers, and I have no problems looking dumb up here in front of you all. So, God, this plant. I'm going to stand over here. Okay, cool. So with that being said, let's, oh, by the way, I'm also going to be cussing quite a bit. So I assume all of you are adults, and you have no problems with me saying the F word, I'd say on a relatively frequent basis. So, great. Let's go ahead and get into this then. So I'm going to start this off with a question, which is, this is more so my opinion, but do you know what the worst phrase in tech is? Scale. Scale? Man, that's a pretty bad one. But that's not the one I had in mind. Who else? What was it? What? It's not possible. Ooh. I kind of like that phrase. But, what is it? MVP. Actually, I like that one because that one's legit. That one's legit. Okay, so the truth is, in my opinion, from my experience, the worst phrase is growth hacking. My God, I fucking hate this word. I hate this phrase so much. It's the worst phrase I've ever heard in my life. This has been the bane of my existence, my professional existence. I was okay when I was 15, but like, you know. But you got to hand to them. You got to hand to the growth hackers of the world because they make it seem so cool, right? And a big thing that they rely on is this concept of A/B testing, right? And what is that, right? So for those of you who don't know what A/B testing is, it's essentially you have two versions of the same website and you change one thing and then you leave the other one to the control and let's say you split them up 50-50 and then you see which one did better. Cool? I assume I didn't lose anyone? Great. And that was really cool to me, you know, when I was a younger Willie, that was really great to me, you know, because I love behavioral psychology. That shit was so cool to me growing up, you know, like, oh man, cause even when I was in college, I'd like run weird little social experiments on people, like I'd touch their shoulder just to see how they react, or, you know, and, so it was cool to be able to kind of, make money off of this. And so when I heard it existed, I was like, man, this is made for me. I want to figure this out. I want to do this. And overall, I mean, I kind of found myself saying, this growth hacking thing is freaking awesome. This is the shit. Okay, so as any young, enthusiastic, young professional with very little relevant tech experience does, they will then go to a site where there's like a home for that community and devour as much reading as they can, like be it through books or sites. And one site that I really spent a lot of time on was growthhackers.com. How many of you have been there? Oh my God, you guys are great. So, oh man, I'm pretty sure I might get some flack from the growth hacker community if they see this video. But so anyway, so I'd go there. and I'd read the blogs that they have there, right? And, because they're growth hackers, right? That's what I wanted to be. So let's look at some of the blogs, right? So the best actual number to use in blog titles. Okay. Instagram ad cost stats in 2017, how to get above average results. Okay. 70 experts debate on the future of AI on marketing. Wow. Then how to 19x your e-commerce site revenue with multi-channel selling. So I'd come across these posts, and I'd think to myself, well, this wasn't really what I wanted to do. This wasn't really what I thought growth hacking was. But the site called growthhackers.com is saying this is what I should learn. So I did that. And I spent the next 2 years of my life, which is a pretty long time in startup terms, learning this concept of being a T-shaped marketer and learning everything that it has to do with it. So, and by the way, a lot of this stuff on the top is actually useful, but in this, I actually did become very knowledgeable in SEO, content marketing. I became a bit successful, or quite successful in PR and social media. And I spent my time just diving into these things. And eventually, I was like, hey, you know what? I'm ready to look for a job. I'm gonna look for a job. I can do this. So I'd go on the job boards looking for growth roles, and I'd see all these growth roles posted because everyone's looking for a growth hacker. Wow, gold mine. So I'd see them, and then I'd apply, and then I'd get interviews or whatever, and I was like, okay, what is this role? Like, oh, we want you to grow our site. We want you to essentially bring traffic to our site. Hence the name of this presentation. But, and I was like, okay, I can do that. I mean, I'm a T-shaped marketer. I can fucking do any of these things in here, kind of. But really just these two. And, and I ended up taking one of these roles. And you know what? I fucked up. Okay, kind of. Okay, so my first job was a growth role, okay? And in that, I found myself doing these roles that was just marketing. And I was just so miserable, man. I was so miserable. I was just doing these roles like that I didn't want to do. I was like, hey, where's the A/B testing? Where's the working with engineers? Where's the designing things? Where's the data, actual good data? Not Google Analytics, just plug in the damn JavaScript snippet. And I was like, man, this sucks. So eventually I tricked a company called Teslio, which is a great company. I love them so much, to transition me from marketing into product management. And that's where the kind of came in, right? Because the truth is marketing did get me in the door. But so I got there into product management, and this was great because that was the first experience I really had to work with engineers and designers, which if you haven't done a lot of yet, for the new PMs, get that experience because you will fail, but you will get better. And that is really important. I was the worst. I was not a very good marketer, but I was an even worse PM when I started. And I was garbage. I was so bad. I can't tell you how bad I was. The engineers I worked with fucking hated me. To me, that's a sign of a very poor PM. So anyways, but eventually things got better and I got pretty good and I did some other things. So at some point when my life started feeling better and I was on kind of this career trajectory that I was happy with, I kind of took a moment and I asked myself this question. Why did I make this mistake in the first place? What happened, right? And of course, a big part of it is my fault. Right? I'm not going to sit here and blame growth hackers. It's not their fault. That'd be really, really lame of me. But so I kind of thought back. And I eventually started talking to a lot of leaders in the industry. So my personal mentor, I'd say, is the VP of product at Metromile and was the head of growth at Atlassian, good friend, and some other people too. And I eventually started getting coffee with all these people and kind of want to know, hey, what is growth to you? What is growth to you? And then there was one common theme that I found was that no one agreed. And that's what kind of inspired this talk for me, was that there was no clear standardization of what growth means. Everyone thinks they know what growth is, right? It's like, what's growth? Make the number bigger. But that's kind of true, but not always. And we need more discrete definitions than that. Otherwise, people are going to waste a lot of time. And that's why I wanted to do this. I want to make sure that for people who maybe want to be a growth PM or whatever, I want to make sure they come in with as little time wasted, and they don't waste as much time as I did to eventually get to maybe where I am, or you'll definitely go further. And what I learned though is that when talking to people is that they kind of just, some of them had a really great definition. A lot of them actually just renamed marketing. And that sucks, because people think it's different. But anyways, so let me go into this here, kind of the main question. What is growth, right? Now, sorry, kind of led you on here, but before I go into what is growth, I want to talk about what growth isn't. Okay? I feel like this is much easier to explain immediately. So, first one, growth is not or are not a big silver bullet solution. Man, you hear this all the time, right? Oh, I heard of this one storage company that made this great referral program. What a great growth hack! Where you made a referral and you got like extra storage, all right, and it referred users. Man, that's fucking brilliant. Do that for my company, is what you might hear. And that is so dumb. So that's not what growth is, okay? Before anyone tells you that. This is what a growth hacker is. Yeah. Next, there's kind of hacky, spammy things for traffic. So this could be like those like pop-ups on blogs or stuff like that, or just throwing stuff in people's faces and not being considerate of the UX. People say that growth is dangerous to the UX, but I actually disagree. I think growth is actually very in tune with the UX and the user intent. And we'll talk about that later. And the last thing is traditional forms of marketing. Growth is not marketing. And many people will disagree with me on that. Now, okay, I'll go on that later, but many people will disagree with me on that, and that's fine. Please feel free to challenge me if you still feel that way at the end of this talk. So, by the way, by many traditional forms of marketing, I mean like brand marketing and, even paid ads to an extent. But anyways, so and with that, let's go ahead and go to the definitions. So I'm going to be defining 3 really specific things that I think a lot of people have a hard time explaining. 1 is product management. 2 is growth product management or growth. And then 3 is just marketing. So, actually, quick note. I stole these definitions by Ben McRedmond, who was the director of growth of Intercom. Really sharp, smart dude. We had talked, and I kind of had conversations and debates with him over this, and he had shown me these definitions, and I liked them so much that I decided to make a presentation out of it. Thanks, Ben. So the first one is product management. Software teams that solve user problems. Now, for those of you who aren't totally colorblind, you can see that I highlighted some words in blue. Hold on to those words. I will be going into those in a moment. Now, I'm just going to give you the definitions. We'll go deeper, I promise. Growth. Software teams that solve business problems. Okay, what does that mean? Hold on. All right. Marketing. Non-software teams that solve business problems. All right, so you have the definitions now. Now, what do these words in blue mean, right? So let's go into that. I promise I'll give examples. Just chill out. Software teams. This is what I call teams that regularly work with engineers and designers. And I mentioned earlier that it is a learned skill to work with engineers and designers, right? It doesn't mean you have to be as good of an engineer as them. No, not at all. You just have to know, what is the effort inclined? What do they like? What do they like working on? Why is it important to them? How do you get them aligned? How do you speak their language, right? And if you don't meet them halfway, you're going to have a really hard time leading anyone. Same with designers. What do designers hate? You need to figure this out. Anyways, so in some counter arguments I've heard of well, sometimes the marketing team or solutions architect team may need to make a request to build a feature. Okay, that's fair. But usually they aren't the ones writing the spec, making the coordination for the complete deliverable, stuff like that. So this is why I say regularly. Yeah. Now, what are user problems? These are problems / metrics which are more than 2 degrees of separation away from realizable revenue. Now, this could be, actually, I'm going to go into an example later, so I'm going to go into that later. So the next one, what is a business problem? These are problems or metrics which are less than 2 degrees of separation away from realizable revenue. So this could be something like optimizing a checkout page, right? So hopefully that makes a bit sense. Now, I said I'd go into examples, and I'm living up to that now. So let's look into product management. What does a product manager usually can work on, say, at a bigger company or even a smaller company? So this is the activity page on Dropbox Business. That's what I work on. And essentially, all you need to know about this is where admins will go to the page and see like, oh, this is what so-and-so worked on, when they opened it, who deleted this. It shows activity. However, it's kind of a mess. Right? Like, what if I wanted to look at something back in January, right? This is a user issue, right? Whether we make it easier or not to filter on something or search for something does not actually affect revenue. And if it does, it's going to be really, really hard to actually trace that effect. So something that a PM, this is a small feature, but something that a PM could be working on would be something like this. Just adding like a search feature. Now, I know they can add much larger things, but this is just an example I'm using, okay? So don't stab me. So this could be something that they would work on. So this solves a user problem. Does that make sense? I see nods. I feel validated. Okay. Next, growth. Software teams that solve business problems. Cool. This is a bit easier to explain. Okay, so this is another experiment here, but so this is the admin console. Again, it's the members page. And if you click into this little bar here, you get sent a little level deeper where you can see a bunch of people who requested to join your team, and the admin can just approve it. Think of it like a Facebook friend request, okay? And if you approve it, it uses a license, which usually means that you paid for it. You spent money on a license, okay? So you can see it's pretty obviously realizable, revenue realizable. It's probably like 0 to 1 degrees. And an experiment we ran on this was actually moving it one level higher. And the logic behind this was, the conversion formula is desire minus friction equals conversion, all right? So we moved it up one level higher and kind of like, oh, okay, let's see how this performed. And I'm not sure if I'm legally allowed to to talk about the results now that we're a public company. But okay, so I know you guys probably want to know, right? I just can't say anything. So this would be like one example of an experiment that we would run. Now, you're probably thinking, or maybe you're not, I don't want to think for you, but not all experiments or not everything we work on are experiments. Not everything we work on are small optimizations. For example, some of you may have heard maybe about a year ago. Does anyone here use Dropbox Business? Tight. All right, we got one. And G Drive users. So some of you may have heard a year ago that we split our Dropbox business plan into two. We went from just one SKU to standard and advanced, right? This was an enormous project. This spanned across the entire company, one of the largest initiatives that Dropbox had ever embarked on. This was led by the growth team. So the growth team did this, which was pretty cool because we were really small back then. And so I just want to show like there's many things that a growth PM can do, right? It's not just these small optimizations that get super boring after time. And trust me, they do get boring after time. So they can be really large projects. That's probably the bulk of what I work on now these days. Cool. Now I'm going to do a quick marketing example. For any marketers out here, if I misrepresent your work, I'm sorry. So again, not software teams that solve business problems. And now the way I kind of define this is that their deliverable is usually outside of the product. They don't really need engineers to deliver what they need to do. So this is just a small example, but I just put up here the Facebook Ads Manager. This could also be the Google Ads Manager thing. So you can see, or maybe they have to write a blog, so they work on the CMS. You can see there's no engineers involved, and their deliverable is on the outside, right? Cool. So now that I've kind of gone through that, let's talk about, really quickly, roles and responsibilities of a growth PM. Great. So even though experiments can get sometimes boring over time, I do spend a lot of my time doing it. And I also do believe that growth PMs need to be constantly running experiments. It's really, really important if you have the traffic. If you have the traffic, run experiments. Most companies don't. But if you have the traffic, run experiments because it's a great way to learn, right? There's a lot of times where we're kind of like, hey, like, we don't know if this will work. And sometimes it may be more expensive to actually get people to come in and do the user research and maybe get kind of a signal. And if it's a really small, cheap effort, you can just build like a quick experiment, run it, assuming you have the leftover traffic, and just figure out, just like, hey, did this actually solve that problem, right? It's a quick MVP to, to building out a feature. Another thing is creating new features, right? This is about the kind of what I was saying earlier with like when we split the SKUs, it could be about creating like a link that when you click on it, it sends invites out or something, right? I made that up. But like, so it could be large features as well. So again, I just really want to fight the misconception that growth PMs only work on optimizations. It's not true. And the last one, probably the most important one, actually I don't know. But the last one is research and analytics. So this is how you figure out what direction you're moving in. It's really important because at some point, when you run a lot of optimizations and experiments, you're going to run into diminishing returns very kind of quickly. It depends on how often you run them. But you're going to run diminishing returns. And when you do, you need to explore new land. And to do that, you need to do research. You need to look at the numbers. You need to look at the data. Figure out what's important. What do you think is like the potential hotspots? So if you want a job long term, in growth, you need to be spending a lot of time in data, working with your data analysts or data scientists. So yeah, and this could also be like if you want to like completely rethink your business model, right? The growth team could be in charge of that if need be. There's definitely a few companies that I've talked to where they completely put the growth team in charge of revamping their product, like the way they sell their product, which is really cool actually. Hopefully you care about revenue. So yeah. Tight. Let's go into skills. And another disclaimer. So this is what we look for at Dropbox. And I can't really speak for other companies. And the truth is, I probably shouldn't even speak for Dropbox. I'm only going to tell you what I've noticed from the bunch of interviews that I've been on, or I've been a part of, and kind of what people are looking for. And it really comes down to these four things. And it's actually very similar to that of a regular product manager. A lot of stuff that, I forgot his name, but came up here and was talking about all the classes that they taught. A lot of them seem actually quite applicable if you take all of them to get you to where you need to be. I don't know, I haven't taken the classes, but to where you want to be. Anyways, for the first one, analytical acumen. This is really important. Please be statistically inclined if you want to be a growth PM. Please be analytically inclined. It is quite important because you have to ask yourself some pretty interesting questions, such as, how do I design this sensitivity to reach a certain level of, how do I design this experiment to reach a certain level of sensitivity, right? And how long can this experiment run for? How do I change the variables to actually meet that, to where it makes sense, right? Because a lot of this job is also experimental design. And if you don't know how to create good experiments, you're going to be really shitty at the job. And you don't want to be shitty at a job. So another thing too is that I've met people where, since they're not statistically inclined, they find themselves lying to themselves without even knowing it. Right? It's like, oh, like what's the minimum detectable effect on this? I don't know, how long do we have to run it? Oh, a month. Oh, then I guess it's 20%. And then they end up like doing a copy change, which is just, you're going to lie to yourself, right? If it ends up being positive. And you don't want to do that. Don't lie to yourself. No one does it on purpose. Well, I don't think they do, but it's very common. Another thing, learn SQL. Really simple. Like I didn't know SQL before I joined Dropbox, but I took like this 2-hour Udemy class, while I was on vacation in Austin. I was like in my hotel. I was like, yeah, fuck it, I'm just gonna do it real quick. And I did it, and it was good enough to get me in the role. And then, not in the role, they didn't give me a SQL test, but like, it was good enough to like, once I got in, I felt comfortable enough using SQL, and once I traversed the databases enough. Mind you, I'm not great at SQL. So, another thing about being analytical, you have to know how to choose your metrics. Sounds super simple, right? Choose your metrics. Yeah, it's actually not. Because, what if your metric actually has a lag time? What if it's a binary outcome, right? What's the significance test to use? These are important things to kind of note. So, I mean, I ran into these issues too, especially where it's like, oh, okay, we concluded this experiment, but if there's a 30-day lagging time, you actually can't really know if you actually did well until for another 30 days, right? So you need to be able to identify that. What does that mean? How do you do that?
Is that basically your KPI?
Yeah, that's like choosing your KPI, yeah. So, and then one more thing is that it's important to know how to investigate. Because if you don't know how to investigate things, you're super fucked. Because things will go wrong. You're going to see that a number's going to drop, and you need to know why. Right? If a number drops, it doesn't drop to 0, it drops to 20%. What does that mean? It doesn't mean it's totally broken, but maybe something is. And you need to be able to look into that and know how to look into that. Next is user experience. I'm not going to go too deep into this. We're at product school. So pretty much, if you're able to empathize with the end user, you can understand their problems. If you can understand their problems, you can make better solutions. Also, learn how to wireframe. Sometimes your designers will that'll piss off your designer sometimes, but it's kind of good to kind of help communicate that sometimes. Though I've kind of stepped back from that because my designers are super good and they come up with much better ideas than I do. So learn how to wireframe. Balsamic is a great tool that I use. Yeah. Cross-functional ability. This is probably the most important one. The thing about being a PM, not just growth, but just any PM, is that you have to lead without managing. You manage no one. You only manage the product. And even that's kind of loose. And to do that, you have to get people to at least like you and respect you. If you're not likable, you can still get your job done. It'll just be a little bit harder. But if you're not respected, you can't get your job done. And I've seen a lot of PMs in my time that just have no power. And when they have no power, they don't release anything. When they don't release anything, they get fired. So don't be a powerless PM. And if you are, find a new company and start over. So you have to be a great communicator. It's super important. Be a really strong communicator. Learn how to be concise, which I'm kind of failing to do because I'm over time. But learn to be concise. Okay, be clear, be concise, be straightforward. Because remember, you're not really the expert of anything, right? You work with engineers, but you're not better than them at engineering. You work with designers, but you're not better than them at designing. You work with analysts, but you're not better than them analytically. So what you have to be is the domain expert in that project or product that you're working on. So if someone has a question, you better be able to figure that out super quick. With that, leads me to the last one here, is project management. So you're going to be running a lot of experiments, or maybe you'll be doing some huge experiments. So it's really important that you know how to keep your shit together. And if you don't, you're going to have a really hard time when someone asks you a question. You have no idea how to find that. So figure that out. Fortunately for me, I kind of had a background in like process management, supply chain, so that helped. And by the way, of all these skills, these 4 skills, I don't think you need to be an expert in all 4, okay? You probably need to be quite good at least 2. Me personally, I probably spike in user experience, cross-functional, and project management. My analytical skills are probably the weakest of the 4, but still good enough, I suppose. It got me the job. So next question I usually get when I present this is, how do you learn these skills? With statistics, with analytics, there's a lot of material on Khan Academy. Learn like basic statistics, right? Like understand what like stat sig means, variance, standard deviations, all that stuff. Really simple. And so Khan Academy is a great resource. And then, what else? Research methodology, research design. I don't really have a good answer for this one, but like Conversion Excel is probably a pretty good resource. And then for cross-functional project management stuff, my recommendation is that if you don't have any experience working with engineers and designers already, try to find an engineer and design friend and convince them to work on something with you. Some of you smirk because you know how hard that is. Because this is really important because you need to be able to align people to a vision. And if you can't, you're not going to be able to build anything. You're going to be a person who's not good at anything and trying to get something done. So that's something I really recommend. And mind you, don't use contractors. God damn it, don't use contractors. That really annoys me because you're not leading them. You're just giving them money, and they're contractually obligated to do something for you. So don't use contractors. I wouldn't say that's a great way to learn. All right. So some of you may have worked with some bigger companies, and you'll see that like not all growth looks the same, right? Like that you'll be like, well, Willie, over here the marketing team was a part of the growth team. You're stupid. And yeah, that's fair, right? Like, and the truth is, from my experience, is that growth doesn't always look the same, right? And it really depends on the business model. So I'm going to do a few comparisons here. So I'm going to compare Dropbox to LinkedIn. And this is a story I have. I was in Vancouver a year ago at a conference, and I saw the VP of growth at LinkedIn speak. And he was like, yeah, our marketing and growth teams are super tightly integrated. And I was like, that's stupid. I don't know how I feel about this guy. Man, that's weird. So I kind of walked it off a bit, and it kind of hit me. They're just a different company. You know, you think about it. LinkedIn's product is a social media company. They rely on ads, which relies on visits, which relies on new user signups. So it actually makes a lot of sense that for their marketing team, for acquisition, to come in and work really closely with the growth team, because if the marketing team sends a bunch of shitty leads or shitty signups or whatever, then the growth team is going to have a really poor time optimizing that. So, and the same thing for Pinterest. So, same thing, I'm not going to go too deep into this, but I wouldn't expect them to be writing blogs, the growth team, the growth product team to be writing blogs or anything, you know. They probably built like that pin it feature that's pretty cool to increase their SEO. I don't know anything about Pinterest. But and then Intercom. They're the ones that are probably most similar, but they actually don't do any optimizations. They don't do any experiments, at least they didn't. They mainly do big feature stuff. So again, growth can vary, and it all makes sense. Which now leads me to my next question. So, you know, you may be on the job market at some point soon, and you're like, okay, I want to be a growth PM. And you may see a bunch of those roles that I saw where, you know, at small startups, and like, yeah, we're looking for a growth person. We want you to come in and build it. A question you should ask yourself, or not ask yourself, but I guess listen to, is can growth exist at all companies? And the truth is, I don't believe so. Or just no. And it's very tempting to apply to every role with growth in it, okay? But if you're looking to build experiments, work with engineers and designers, and not do marketing, there's nothing wrong with marketing. If that's not what you're looking to do, then you should probably make sure that it hits a few prereqs that I will show you in a second. And by the way, I actually don't think there's a lot of companies where growth teams can actually exist. So, and here's why. So I kind of come up with these like prereqs that a company needs to have in order for a growth team to exist. And if you're like the founder of a company or whatever, and you're like, hey, I'm thinking about building a growth team. Willie, should I? I'm just going to ask you these things. Like, do you have these 3 things? Okay, so spare yourself the question. Just listen. First is product market fit. Okay, you cannot grow anything that's built on quicksand. Okay, so if you don't have a product that sticks with your users, if your product sucks, you're not going to building a growth team around that is not going to help at all. So product market fit, I'm not going to go too deep into that. Should be pretty obvious. Data. So some of you may hate me for this one, but in my experience, growth PMs are more data-driven and data-inclined and data-oriented than traditional core PMs. I saw a face back there. But I'm more than happy to have someone that challenge me on that. But the company must have data and clean data, right? I'm not talking about like a really poorly integrated Google Analytics snippet or like a really poorly implemented Mixpanel implementation, which Mixpanel is awesome, by the way. But like, but rather, it's not just about being able to track everything, but also is the data clean? There's so many companies out there with shitty data. And you need to be able to make sure that the data that you have is trustworthy. In my opinion, bad data is worse than no data. So, yeah. And the next one, which to me is probably the most important, did I say that already? Most important? Whatever. So, is company support. This one kind of breaks my heart a bit because I've seen this happen so often, where a person will come up to me and like, yeah, I'm the head of growth at this company, and and they're the only person that does growth there. And they'll talk about how it's so hard to do anything because the founder, when they hired them, didn't know that they had to staff them with engineering resources and designers and analysts. They didn't know they needed that because they thought they were just marketers. They thought they'd just bring them in and be like, yo, hey, come on and grow our shit. And they end up wasting a lot of time, and they learn this. I mean, this happened to me, but like, so that's a real big bummer because a lot of times when you see some of these job recs out there, a lot of them are just kind of like these first-time founders that maybe have raised some money and their board says like, hey, go hire a growth person. And they're like, okay. And then they go and put a job rec up. So, and they don't know what growth is. So be careful for that. It's super common. It's very, very bad. And also, I'd be really skeptical of any company that says like, hey, come in, we want you to be our first growth PM. If you don't have any growth PM experience. If you have PM experience, that may be fine. But if you don't have any growth experience, like, I'd be skeptical of that. There's a good chance they don't know what growth is. And while I'm not doubting your abilities, it's usually good if you don't have the experience to go to a place that already has a growth PM that can really train you. I can't really stress how important it is to actually get trained. And as a person who came from a more entrepreneurial background, it is super important to learn good habits as a PM because bad habits will really screw you over in the long run. So when you go out there looking for a role, the reason I kind of did this talk is I want to make sure that as many of you are going to be entering the job force soon, hopefully, I want you to avoid the traps that I went through, that I got caught in, and you don't waste a lot of time. Fortunately, it seems like none of you seem to be down that path. Whatever, useless talk. But, and that's really all I have. And now I'm happy to take questions.
The first question I have for you, first of all, great talk.
Thank you.
It's really about like the areas of actually trying to be likable, to actually try to lead without actual authority. You once mentioned that it's something that you had struggled with. How did you learn to overcome that, or be able to gain the trust and the visibility amongst like teams outside your departments?
This is so for the people out there. The question was essentially, how do I become likable and trustworthy to my cross-functional partners? Right? Is that essentially it?
Basically.
So I'd first focus on being respected, and the best way to be respected is to know your shit. And if someone asks you, what's the KPI behind this, or why are we doing this, have a really ironclad answer that's backed up by research and data. No one can really, well, you can, the irrational can argue with data. And if you have that, then you're probably pretty well set up for success. God damn this shirt. All right, fuck this shirt. But so you're probably pretty well set up for success because there's definitely been times where someone's asked me like, so this is really bad. I probably shouldn't share this, but they've asked me like, what's the KPI behind this? And I'm like, I don't know. That's giving you an idea of how bad I was. So yeah, does that kind of cover in regards to being liked?
Let me follow up with another one.
Yeah, go ahead.
Were there any situations where you were starting off as a growth product manager, actually like struggled with gaining the trust and respect, but able to overcome that later on? I think that's what I'm trying to get at.
Do you also follow some kind of data governance policy other than data audits?
I don't know. I'm not sure, to be honest. I'm not the data analyst, so it's more so me making the requests for data than it is for me kind of making sure that it's implemented correctly. Sorry, it's you, then you.
To what extent do product decisions bubble up from growth product managers versus management? Like, is it a push-up or a top-down?
The question is, what extent does the product decision go from bottoms up versus top down? I don't know. We've definitely had our fair share of projects that came from top down, but we've definitely, I'd say most things that people are working on, they come from bottom up, straight from our customers. from research. So in regards to like the raw number, if I were to compare absolute values, it would be by far a majority from the customers' bottoms-up ideas.
Are designers shared between product management and growth product management teams? And if not, how do you make sure that you don't accidentally work at cross purposes?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the question was, are design resources are design resources shared among product and growth teams? And if they are,
If they're not,
if they're not, if they're not, how do you make sure we're not conflicting? So at Dropbox, they're not. We recently got, not recently, but we got our own growth design team. And this is where it really comes down to what I was saying about cross-functional. You have to be very good cross-functionally because a big part of your job is keeping people informed and to avoid things like that. I spend more of my day than I care to admit on Slack, simply because someone's usually telling me something like, hey, just FYI, this team over here is going to run this on this page. Does that affect you at all? They're thinking about doing this. Does that affect you at all? So that's all kind of stuff that I always need to be in the know of, because if I'm not, and we don't have like mutual exclusion set up, then I'm going to have some pretty gnarly interaction effects with my experiment, which will make me have to rerun it and waste a lot of time. Wait, one second. Did I skip someone? No, okay, yeah.
So two-part question, I guess. You mentioned a bit about company support for product management in general. And you also sort of mentioned something about mentorship for going into a product, going into a company as either as a growth product manager or as a product manager in general. And so I come from more of a software background, I'm an engineer.
Cool.
And so I guess I've sort of had a conversation with some friends who are product managers. I kind of get your mentality on what sort of resources should a company give to new product managers coming on board, and what sort of work have you done in both directions, right? Like both as a product manager being mentored by other more experienced product managers, but also as a mentor yourself to maybe a newer employee who's a new product manager.
Yeah.
And what are the things that a company should do, or what is a mentor? As
Yeah.
a mentor, what should you do?
That's a really great question. I think there should definitely be a lot of time spent on that, but I'll give you short answers. So the question was, the question was, what have companies done? What should companies do for newer product managers to help mentor them? And what have I done to help mentor new product managers? Or what was that? So what mentorship have I received, and then also what mentorship have I given to other PMs, right? So that's a really good question. So at Dropbox, there's one thing I really, really love about Dropbox, which is so really, really great. I can't stress this enough. This is not me just drinking the Kool-Aid. This is one of the best things about Dropbox, is that we care a lot, at least our team, cares a lot about onboarding and training. This is really important. So something I really believe in is that you can either hire rock star people and give them no direction, or you can hire good people and give them a lot of direction. But you cannot hire good people and give them no direction, or okay people and give them no direction. I strongly, strongly believe that. And I've seen a lot of companies come in, spend all that time hiring someone, and then give them no training because they think they're just going to take off. And at Dropbox, we actually hire really great people and give them quite a bit of direction. And I think a lot of people will be like, oh, that sucks. But actually, I think it's really great. Now, to answer your actual questions. So at Dropbox, something that our team does a lot is we really handhold people, right? Like, we want to make sure that their communication styles are actually strong. So this can mean like when I teach spec writing classes, right? Like, I look over some of our new PM specs to make sure they're kind of up to snuff, to kind of help them onboard to our engineers' styles. And I'll look over and I'll be like, okay, like this is probably a more concise way of doing this, but without being too micromanagey, right? I'm not like a prick about it. But like, so I'll like look over them. I'll kind of help look over their analytics. I'll make sure I ask a lot of questions to them. Like, okay, so what do you think we should do here? Why do you think that? So if I did this, this is what I would do. Okay, so what would happen if I did this? Like, I'd really walk them through. I want to make sure that they know how we think. Now, it's up to them to act on that or not. But the thing that's really important is that they know how we think. And a company should teach that, as opposed to don't just teach the motions, right? That's stupid. But they need to teach, why do we do it this way? What is so important about that? So Dropbox does a lot of that in regards to, it's a lot of manual hand-holding, okay? I'll be honest with you. It takes a lot of time. Onboarding is a huge thing. It takes a lot of time, but it is the most important thing. And if you don't onboard correctly, and sometimes you may hire that rock star person that just kill shit from the start, but to be safe, I'd really consider onboarding, spending a lot of time onboarding. I have time for one more question, by the way. I can talk to you, but I'll stick around and talk more. So someone who hasn't asked a question yet would like an opportunity. Otherwise, okay.
For somebody at more like an entry level, that was looking to get into like a product management function?
Yeah.
Would you recommend like applying for associate product management jobs or breaking into it through like either the sales marketing function?
It's funny. I actually have like a bunch of slides after this that go into how to become a growth PM, but I talk about it, but it's too long, so I cut it. So that's a really great question. Oh, the question is, as a new PM who's looking to go in the job, do I recommend to be a PM, associate PM, or go through sales marketing? Okay, since it's the last question, I'll give you a full answer. So usually at the associate PM levels, they usually look for like very, very new grads, and usually only bigger companies have APM. So like Yahoo, Google, Dropbox, they usually have it, and they usually look like new grads. So I definitely recommend you try. If you can get in, cool. Sometimes they may just reject you straight out of the door because you're not like a recent university grad. I'm not sure if you are or aren't, but so that's kind of the qualm for that. If you get into an APM program, take that, I would say, over any other PM offer. So that's my recommendation, because then you have that set up at a company that will train you, onboard you, teach you well. If you now, on the other hand, at a small startup, if you take, the question was, or go through sales and marketing, right? So that's a much longer route, but it is every bit possible, so long as you are very proactive about working with product managers. Create that bridge yourself, okay? Because the product manager is probably not going to reach out to you and be like, hey, salesperson, we need your help. Give you some data insights. Instead, offer up some insights to that person. Come as quantitatively prepared as possible, to where they cannot refuse but to look at you as a valuable asset, as the voice of the customer. If you can cement yourself as that, and then even be a part of the brainstorm sessions, to just throw yourself in there. Even if it's rude, just throw yourself in there. If you can prove to be a valuable asset, then, and they can't ignore you, then eventually you can start having conversations with, hey, I want to be a PM. And if you can have their backing, like, yeah, he's super solid, then you'll be more likely to get a transfer.